Why do some INFJs vanish without warning, seem perfectly fine being completely alone, and somehow intimidate people without even trying, while other INFJs are warm, people-pleasing, and desperate for connection? What if I told you there's a version of the INFJ that most personality tests won't tell you about, one that breaks every stereotype you've ever heard? Picture this, two people who both tested as INFJs. One's constantly seeking validation, organizing group hangouts, and bending over backwards to help everyone. The other, they disappear for weeks, answer to nobody, and have this magnetic presence that makes people nervous and curious at the same time. Same personality type on paper, but they might as well be from different planets. Here's the truth that's going to blow your mind. There's a subspecies of INFJ that operates by completely different rules. They're not broken INFJs or unhealthy versions. They're what happens when the INFJ blueprint combines with something called the Sigma mindset, creating a personality so rare and so misunderstood that even psychology experts struggle to pin them down. I'm talking about habits that happen in the shadows, patterns so subtle that even other INFJs watching this might not realize they're doing them. These aren't your typical INFJs like deep conversations observations. We're going deep into the psychology of the rarest version of an already rare personality. Stick around, because what you're about to discover might just explain why you've always felt different from every INFJ description you've ever read, or why that one INFJ you know is absolutely nothing like the others. Understanding the foundation, what makes a Sigma INFJ different? Before we jump into the hidden habits, let's set the stage here. Regular INFJs are already pretty rare, right? They make up only about 1 to 2% of the population. They're known for being empathetic, idealistic, and deeply concerned with helping others. They've got that counselor vibe, that warm presence that makes people feel understood. But Sigma INFJs? They're a different breed altogether. Think of them as the INFJs who've turned inward even more than usual, who've mastered the art of self-reliance to an almost intimidating degree. They've got all that classic INFJ intuition and insight, but they've wrapped it in a layer of fierce independence and strategic thinking that catches people off guard. The term Sigma comes from the social hierarchy concept where Sigmas exist outside the traditional alpha-beta structure. They're not competing for the top spot because, frankly, they don't care about the hierarchy at all. They're doing their own thing, playing by their own rules, and somehow managing to be influential without even trying. When you combine the Sigma mindset with the INFJ personality type, you get someone who's deeply intuitive, highly independent, strategically minded, and completely comfortable operating in the shadows. They're the chess players who see 20 moves ahead but never brag about their victories. Now, let's get into those hidden habits that set them apart. 1. They practice strategic solitude. Here's something most people misunderstand about Sigma INFJs. They don't just need alone time, they weaponize it. While regular INFJs might withdraw to recharge after too much social interaction, Sigma INFJs use their solitude like a tactical advantage. What does this look like in real life? Well, they're incredibly intentional about when and how they spend time alone. They're not just scrolling through social media or binge-watching shows during their downtime. Instead, they're actively using that solitude to process information, strategize their next moves, and work on personal projects that matter to them. You'll notice that a Sigma INFJ can disappear for days or even weeks without explanation. They're not being rude or antisocial. They're in what they call their deep work phase. During this time, they might be learning a new skill, working on a creative project, or simply observing patterns in their life that need adjustment. This strategic solitude also helps them maintain their emotional independence. See, regular INFJs can sometimes get lost in other people's emotions because of their strong empathy. But Sigma INFJs have learned to use alone time to recalibrate their emotional compass, making sure they're not absorbing energy that doesn't belong to them. They've figured out that true power comes from being comfortable in your own company. And honestly, that's intimidating to people who need constant validation from others. 2. They keep multiple exit strategies. This one's fascinating because it reveals just how differently Sigma INFJs think about relationships and commitments. While most INFJs are loyal to a fault, Sigma INFJs are loyal with contingency plans. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not being paranoid or untrusting. It's more like they've learned from experience that things can change in an instant, and they refuse to be caught off guard. So they mentally prepare exit strategies for almost every situation they're in. In relationships, this might mean keeping their emotions slightly guarded, even when they're deeply connected to someone. They love hard, but they also know how to walk away if the relationship becomes toxic. They've already thought through how they'd handle a breakup, what they'd do if they had to move, or how they'd manage if a friendship turned sour. At work, Sigma INFJs are always updating their skills and keeping their options open. They might seem completely committed to their job, but they've also got a side hustle brewing, or they're learning something new that could open different doors. They never put all their eggs in one basket. This isn't about being cold or calculating, it's about maintaining autonomy. Sigma INFJs value their freedom above almost everything else, and they refuse to be trapped by circumstances or dependent on anyone else for their well-being. 3. They collect information like intelligence agents. Here's where things get really interesting. All INFJs are naturally observant, but Sigma INFJs take it to another level. They're constantly gathering information about people, situations, and environments in a way that's almost methodical. When they meet someone new, they're not just making small talk. They're filing away details about that person's values, motivations, inconsistencies, and patterns. They remember things you mentioned 6 months ago in passing. They notice when your story changes or when something seems off. But here's the key difference. They rarely reveal how much they know. While a regular INFJ might use their observations to connect with others or offer help, Sigma INFJs keep their cards close to their chest. They're building a mental database of information that they can draw on when needed. This habit extends to how they consume information in general. They're voracious learners who study psychology, human behavior, strategy, and various other fields that help them understand how the world really works. They're reading books that most people have never heard of, listening to podcasts about obscure topics, and connecting dots that others miss. They do all this quietly, though. You won't see them posting about every book they read or every insight they gain. They prefer to keep their knowledge as an ace up their sleeve. 4. They master the art of selective vulnerability. Now, this is one of the most subtle yet powerful habits of Sigma INFJs. Most people think of INFJs as open books when it comes to deep conversations, but Sigma INFJs have refined vulnerability into an art form. They know exactly how much to share and with whom. They can seem incredibly open and authentic while still keeping their deepest thoughts and feelings protected. It's like they're showing you layers of themselves without ever revealing the core. This selective vulnerability serves multiple purposes. First, it allows them to build connections without making themselves too dependent on others. Second, it helps them maintain their mysterious aura that naturally draws people in. And third, it protects them from potential manipulation or betrayal. A Sigma INFJ might share a personal story that makes you feel close to them, but later you'll realize you still don't know the full picture of who they are. They're masters at creating intimacy without losing control of their narrative. They've also learned that true vulnerability is about quality, not quantity. They'd rather have 1 or 2 people who truly understand them than dozens of surface-level relationships where they're constantly explaining themselves. 5. They operate in cycles rather than consistency. Here's something that confuses the heck out of people around Sigma INFJs. They're not consistent in the traditional sense. While most people try to maintain steady routines and predictable patterns, Sigma INFJs work in intense cycles. They might be super social and engaged for a few weeks, then completely vanish for a month. They could be laser-focused on a project for days on end, then suddenly switch gears entirely. They're productive in bursts rather than in steady, daily increments. This isn't about being flaky or unreliable. It's about honoring their natural rhythms and energy patterns. Sigma INFJs have figured out that they do their best work when they follow their intuitive cycles rather than forcing themselves into society's expectations of consistency. During their cycles, they're incredibly productive and social. They might attend events, work on multiple projects, and engage deeply with people. But during their off cycles, they retreat completely to process, rest, and recalibrate. The genius of this approach is that it allows them to pour everything into what they're doing when they're doing it, rather than spreading themselves thin trying to maintain constant availability. 6. They build independent power structures. This habit is all about self-sufficiency taken to the next level. While regular INFJs might rely on their careers or relationships for security, Sigma INFJs are quietly building their own independent power structures. What does this mean exactly? They're creating multiple streams of income, developing diverse skill sets, and building networks that don't depend on any single institution or person. They might have a day job, but they're also investing, freelancing, or building a business on the side. They're learning skills that make them valuable in multiple contexts. Maybe they can write, code, design, and teach. They're not putting themselves in a position where losing one job or one relationship would devastate them. This extends to their living situations too. Sigma INFJs often live below their means, maintaining flexibility and freedom rather than tying themselves down with expensive commitments. They'd rather have options than luxury. They're also strategic about their relationships, maintaining connections across different areas of life without being dependent on any single social circle. They can navigate different groups and contexts without losing themselves in the process. 7. They practice intentional inscrutability. While most people are trying to be understood, Sigma INFJs are comfortable with being a mystery. In fact, they cultivate it intentionally. They've learned that maintaining some level of mystery actually gives them more influence and freedom. This doesn't mean they're dishonest or fake. Rather, they're selective about what they reveal and when. They answer questions without really answering them. They share stories that reveal some things while concealing others. They're comfortable letting people wonder about them. This intentional inscrutability serves them in multiple ways. It protects their privacy, keeps people from making assumptions about them, and creates an aura of intrigue that naturally draws others in. People are fascinated by what they can't fully figure out. In conversations, a Sigma INFJ might redirect attention away from themselves with well-placed questions or by sharing just enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing their full hand. They're experts at controlling the narrative without seeming controlling. They've also learned that people will project whatever they want onto a mystery, which can work in the Sigma INFJ's favor. If people don't fully understand you, they can't fully manipulate you either. 8. They maintain emotional sovereignty. This is perhaps one of the most important habits that separates Sigma INFJs from regular INFJs. While all INFJs feel emotions deeply, Sigma INFJs have learned to maintain sovereignty over their emotional state. What this means is that they refuse to let external circumstances or other people's emotions dictate their inner peace. They feel everything intensely, but they've developed the ability to observe their emotions rather than being consumed by them. When someone tries to guilt-trip them, it doesn't work. When people around them are panicking, they remain calm. When there's drama swirling, they stay centered. They've built an inner fortress that protects their emotional well-being. This doesn't mean they're cold or detached. They still care deeply about people and causes, but they've learned the difference between empathy and emotional entanglement. They can understand someone's pain without taking it on as their own. They practice this through various means: meditation, journaling, setting firm boundaries, and regularly checking in with themselves to ensure they're not absorbing energy that doesn't serve them. They treat their emotional state as sacred territory that they guard fiercely. 9. They engineer their environment for minimal friction. Sigma INFJs are masters at designing their lives to minimize unnecessary friction and maximize flow. They're not just going with the flow, they're creating the flow. This shows up in how they organize their spaces, structure their days, and choose who they spend time with. Everything in their environment is intentional. If something or someone consistently creates friction or drains their energy, they remove it. Their living spaces are often minimalist and highly functional. They don't keep things out of obligation or attachment. Everything serves a purpose or brings genuine joy. This creates an environment where they can think clearly and work effectively. They're also strategic about their commitments. They say no to almost everything so they can say yes to the few things that truly matter. They've learned that every commitment is a trade-off, and they're ruthless about protecting their time and energy. This extends to their digital lives too. Sigma INFJs often have strict boundaries around social media, notifications, and digital distractions. They control their tech rather than letting it control them. 10. They document everything, but share nothing. Here's the final hidden habit that really sets Sigma INFJs apart. They're obsessive documenters who rarely share what they've documented. They journal extensively, take detailed notes, create systems for tracking insights, and maintain records of important information. But unlike the social media generation that documents to share, Sigma INFJs document for themselves. They're creating a personal knowledge base that they can draw on over time. They're tracking patterns in their behavior, recording lessons learned, and building a reference library of insights. This habit serves multiple purposes. It helps them process their rich inner world, track their growth over time, learn from past experiences, and make better decisions going forward. They're essentially creating a personal manual for their own life. Years later, they can look back at their journals and see patterns they couldn't see in the moment. They can track how certain decisions played out, what warning signs they missed, and what strategies worked best. This documentation also helps them maintain emotional sovereignty. When they're feeling confused or overwhelmed, they can review their notes and remind themselves of truths they've already learned. It's like having a conversation with your past self who can offer wisdom from experience. The integration, how these habits work together. Now, here's what's really powerful about these habits. They don't exist in isolation. They work together as a cohesive system that creates the Sigma INFJ's unique presence and capability. The strategic solitude gives them time to document and process information. The emotional sovereignty allows them to maintain their exit strategies without being reactive. The independent power structures are built during their productive cycles. The intentional inscrutability protects their carefully engineered environment. It's like each habit reinforces and supports the others, creating a lifestyle that's both deeply intentional and remarkably flexible. Sigma INFJs aren't following a rigid system. They're dancing between these habits in a way that feels natural to them. This integration is why Sigma INFJs can seem so paradoxical to others. They're deeply feeling yet detached, intensely loyal yet ready to leave, mysterious yet authentic, solitary yet influential. These contradictions aren't weaknesses. They're the natural result of operating from a different paradigm than most people. The shadow side, when these habits go too far. Of course, we've got to address the potential downsides here. Every strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness, and these habits are no exception. Strategic solitude can become isolation. Exit strategies can prevent deep commitment. Information gathering can turn into paranoia. Selective vulnerability can become emotional unavailability. Operating in cycles can look like instability. Building independent power structures can lead to disconnection from community. Intentional inscrutability can create loneliness. Emotional sovereignty can become emotional suppression. Engineering your environment can limit growth opportunities. And documenting everything without sharing can mean missing out on connection. The healthiest Sigma INFJs are aware of these potential pitfalls and work consciously to maintain balance. They know when to push toward independence and when to lean into connection. They understand that these habits are tools, not absolutes. Living as a Sigma INFJ in a connected world. One of the biggest challenges for Sigma INFJs is navigating a world that increasingly values constant connection, transparency, and consistent availability. Social media culture, work expectations, and relationship norms all push against the natural tendencies of Sigma INFJs. But here's the thing, Sigma INFJs are actually perfectly positioned for certain aspects of modern life. The digital age allows them to work independently, build businesses from home, connect on their own terms, and maintain privacy while still having influence. They can leverage technology to create the lifestyle they want without conforming to traditional structures. They can build audiences without revealing their personal lives. They can work with people around the world without being tied to a location. The key is being intentional about how they engage with modern tools and expectations. They use social media strategically rather than compulsively. They set boundaries around availability that honor their need for solitude. They choose work that allows for cyclical productivity. The gift Sigma INFJs offer the world. Despite their independent nature, Sigma INFJs have a unique gift to offer the world. Their strategic thinking, emotional wisdom, and ability to see patterns others miss make them powerful change agents. Because they're not seeking approval or status, they can speak uncomfortable truths that others won't touch. They can make decisions based on principles rather than popularity. They can work on important problems without needing recognition or credit. Their independence makes them trustworthy in a different way. You know they're not telling you what you want to hear or playing political games. When a Sigma INFJ commits to something, it's because they genuinely believe in it, not because they're seeking benefits. Their ability to work alone means they can tackle projects that require deep focus and sustained effort. They're not distracted by drama or derailed by obstacles. They just keep moving forward quietly until the work is done. How to recognize a Sigma INFJ. So how do you know if you've encountered a Sigma INFJ? Here are some telltale signs. They're present but somehow distant at the same time. You feel like you know them, but you also realize you don't really know them at all. They're interested in you but don't seem to need anything from you. They disappear regularly without explanation or apology. They have opinions but don't feel the need to convince you they're right. They're knowledgeable about random topics you wouldn't expect. They seem to see through social games without being judgmental about them. They're comfortable with silence. They ask questions that make you think. They remember details about you that you forgot you shared. They seem to always have options even when circumstances look limiting. Most importantly, there's something about them that you can't quite put your finger on. A depth, an intensity, a quality that makes them memorable even when they're trying to blend in. Are you a Sigma INFJ? If you've been nodding along to these habits, you might be wondering if you're a Sigma INFJ yourself. Here's how to know for sure. First, do you feel fundamentally different from other INFJs you've encountered? Do their approaches to relationships, career, and life feel too dependent or too people-focused for you? Second, do you genuinely prefer operating outside traditional structures? Not because you're rebellious, but because it just makes more sense to you. Third, do these habits feel natural rather than forced? Sigma INFJs aren't trying to be mysterious or independent. They just are. It's not a persona. It's their authentic way of being. Fourth, do you feel equally comfortable alone and with others, but prefer alone? Do you have the social skills to navigate different contexts but choose solitude most of the time? Finally, do you feel more powerful when you're working independently than when you're part of a team? Not because you can't work with others, but because your best work happens when you're following your own rhythm? If you answered yes to most of these questions, congratulations, you might just be part of this rare subset of an already rare personality type. Conclusion. So there you have it, the 10 hidden habits that set Sigma INFJs apart from every other INFJ. These aren't surface-level traits you can fake or adopt overnight. They're deep patterns that emerge from a fundamental approach to life that values autonomy, strategy, and emotional sovereignty above social connection and external validation. Understanding these habits can help regular INFJs appreciate a different way of expressing their personality type. It can help Sigma INFJs feel less alone in their approach to life. And it can help everyone else understand that mysterious INFJ in their life who doesn't quite fit the typical mold. Remember, being a Sigma INFJ isn't better or worse than being a regular INFJ. It's just different. Both types have unique strengths and challenges. Both have important gifts to offer the world. The key is understanding yourself well enough to honor your natural tendencies rather than forcing yourself into someone else's definition of what you should be. If you're a Sigma INFJ, embrace it. Use these habits intentionally rather than apologizing for them. Build a life that works for you, not one that makes sense to everyone else. Your independence isn't selfishness. It's self-knowledge. Your mystery isn't deception. It's self-protection. Your cycles aren't inconsistency, they're self-respect. And if you're not a Sigma INFJ but you know one, give them space to be who they are. Don't take their distance personally. Don't try to force them into consistency. Don't demand more transparency than they're comfortable giving. Just appreciate that they're operating from a different playbook, and that's perfectly okay. The world needs all kinds of people, including those who color outside the lines, who build their own paths, and who refuse to be easily categorized. Sigma INFJs are just one example of how complex and varied human personality can be. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. If this resonated with you, you know what to do, like subscribe and drop a comment sharing which habit resonated most with you. Are you a Sigma INFJ? Or do you know one? Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay true to yourself, whoever that may be.